history to the movement we're seeing now. And here's what happened. In the early 1970s, Christianity, evangelicalism in particular, was going down a path to social justice. It started in campus radical movements, mostly of the 1960s. Richard Mao, in the Dutch Reform tradition, ends up getting radicalized in college and starts to walk away from his Christian faith. But he reads The Uneasy Conscience of Modern Fundamentalism, finds out that there's a way to base his new left ideas on a Christian framework. The premier institution for neo-evangelicalism is what they called, what Carl Henry came up with, was Fuller Theological Seminary. So this seminary started changing their focus from understanding the Bible and communicating it to souls to now transforming social structures, creating a new movement. People like Ron Sider, Jim Wallace, John Alexander, Sharon Gallagher, Samuel Escobar, and the list goes on, came together in 1973, and they put together what was called the Chicago Declaration on Evangelical Social Concern. Here's a portion of the Chicago Declaration. We must attack the materialism of our culture and the maldistribution of the nation's wealth and services. We recognize that as a nation we play a crucial role in the imbalance and injustice of international trade and development. Before God and a billion hungry neighbors, we must rethink our values regarding our present standard of living and promote a more just acquisition and distribution of the world's resources. They were academics. They were people who worked for the government. They were elites. And working class people rallied around Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and people like that.
If you think our solution is political, you too have been deceived. Don't you commit yourself to some political party or politician. You commit yourself to the principles of God and demand those parties and politicians align themselves with the eternal values in this book, and America will be forever the greatest nation on this earth.
The moral majority, religious right formed, and they took the nation by storm and stole all the headlines. So it was an academic elitist movement, the social justice movement. They ended up going other places, mostly in academia. So they are now teaching. They're under the radar. They're not getting the headlines the religious right's getting, but they're still present. They didn't all die. They didn't go away. They kept doing what they were doing, and they taught it in places like Wheaton College and Fuller Theological Seminary. And the next generation of academics and pastors have been taught at their feet.
Now, the communist goal is to overthrow every government and run the world. We are its main competitor. And given that Christianity has been our chief source of strength throughout the centuries, that absolutely had to go. That had to be discredited, undermined, smeared, and utterly destroyed before they could present us with their alternative.
The communists have always been looking for inroads. So, about the 1920s, and this is after the Soviet Revolution in Russia, they started infiltrating seminaries. They targeted various religious orders. They targeted the Franciscans, they targeted the Benedictines, but they primarily targeted the Jesuits. And because the Jesuits were very, very highly educated, they used a lot of their education and their highly developed philosophy in order to hide what they were really teaching.
Bella Dodd, who was a member of the American Communist Party back in the 30s, she was in the teachers' unions in New York. She talked about how she had helped to bring 1,100 young communists into the Catholic Church.
She said that by the time she got out, which was about 20 or 30 years later, she had seen many of those young men raised to the rank of bishop and even cardinal.
So what we're seeing happen right now has already happened before, and it's happened in the Catholic Church.
Without a doubt. And one of the things that I think cannot be emphasized enough is that the primary mode of promoting socialism within the Catholic Church, and now you're seeing it in the Protestant community, is through social justice initiatives.
What is a Communist Front? What is a Socialist Front? It's an organization that purports to do one thing, but has a significant number of leaders involved, or enough leaders to actually push it in another direction.
I booked a flight to Washington, D.C. to attend my first CPAC. I'll never forget the words that I read in a book that I happened to have along with me in my lap to pass the time of travel. Apparently, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, the communist regime, had been studying America for about 20 years. They were studying to figure out what it was that was ultimately responsible for the unprecedented success of the United States. An official of the atheist communist Chinese Academy of Social Sciences said the following words in summary of their 20-year study of the West. And I quote, "We studied everything we could from the historical, political, economic, and cultural perspective. At first, we thought it was because you had more powerful guns than we had. Then we thought it was because you had the best political system. Next, we focused on your economic system. But in the past 20 years, we've realized that the heart of your culture is your religion, Christianity. That is why the West is so powerful. The Christian moral foundation of social and cultural life was what made possible the emergence of capitalism and then the successful transition to democratic politics. We do not have any doubt about this.